From Boston University and BU Alumni Relations, welcome to Proud to BU Around the World. I'm your host, Jeff Murphy, and this season, we're taking the podcast on the road to meet some of our most interesting and accomplished alumni navigating life and careers in cities across the globe.
Today, it's my pleasure to welcome guest host Yuna Lee back to the podcast. Yuna and I work together in the alumni office, where she oversees our efforts to keep alumni in Asia Pacific connected to BU and to each other. She's also a fellow Terrier, having earned her MBA from Questrom in 2014. Yuna, thanks again for hosting today's interview. Take it away.
Thanks for having me back, Jeff. Today, my guest is Ellen Wang. Ellen graduated with a degree in political science from the College of Arts and Science in 1990. Since then, he has built a very distinguished career as a foreign correspondent. When we recorded our conversation in February 2020, Ellen was the Deputy Bureau Chief for the Emerging Markets team at Bloomberg News Shanghai office. Now he has been promoted as the South China Bureau Chief. He will be based in Shenzhen, China, and he will continue to be deeply involved in Bloomberg's coverage of prominent stories in the area. On this episode of the podcast, Ellen shared stories from his unique BU experience and provides insights into what it's like to be a journalist embedded within the black box of China.
Ellen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today from Shanghai, China. I thought we can start from telling the listeners where you grew up.
Oh, sure. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and Williamsburg, actually, before it became this hipster place. I went to a public school, PS 132, and it was mostly Black and Hispanic kids. My parents transferred me to a Catholic school where there were all these white Italian kids, so it was quite a shock. Yeah, Brooklyn is sort of what defines me, I would say, just because, it's become much more of a hip place, but when I was growing up, it was more of a working class type environment. And for me, it was quite difficult, always being the only Asian kid in school besides my siblings. And I remember growing up and after school having to go to my parents' restaurant to help out while the other kids used to play, and I used to resent that. But I think it's really made me grow up in Brooklyn and having to work at my parents' restaurant and being in an environment where there weren't people like me, has made me into a much more resilient person.
That's great. So, Ellen, what was it about BU that captured your attention and eventually made you to decide to come here from Brooklyn, New York?
Initially, I didn't really have any high expectations for myself. I have to admit that when I went to high school, I got in trouble quite a bit. And I did well in some classes, didn't do so well in others, but basically my high school experience was pretty disappointing. And I ended up following a lot of my friends and going to a local area college. But I realized when I went to that college that I wanted more. And I decided that, I wanted to go to a bigger, better school. And so so what I did was I really did well in school, and I remember writing for the college newspaper. I was working for a bank. I did all of that to build up my application for BU, and then I applied to a couple of schools outside of New York, and I decided to go to BU just because one of my professors told me what a good school it was. I always heard about how Boston is the place to be for colleges. So it was really more of word of mouth than anything. And also, it was my first chance to leave New York.
Very good. I know, Ellen, you graduated from College of Arts and Sciences. Would you mind telling the listeners what you studied there?
Sure. It used to be called CLA, but they changed it to CAS now. And I was a poli-sci major, and my advisor back then was Terry McDougall. I just mentioned him just because he was sort of the reason why I decided to major in political science. When I first went to BU, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to major in, and I took acting for a little while before I realized I'm not sure whether or not I can make this a career. So I went to a major political science at the College of Liberal Arts, and I took courses in everything under the sun. I remember some of the best courses I took were in creative writing, music appreciation. For me, the most important thing was I took a lot of challenging classes, not just in that school, but in some of the other colleges at BU. I remember taking calculus and what else? Some other like some molecular biology, and I did just to sort of stretch out the brain a bit, sort of test myself. So, and I think that's important when you're in college to be able to take a lot of different courses because you never know what could be useful. For me, it was creative writing and calculus of all classes.
So, Ellen, let's talk a little bit more about your BU experience. Was there any experience that really stick to you? Maybe did you ever took a study abroad program, or was there a faculty, staff, or a fellow classmate who was most influential to you?
I had a very untraditional college experience. My first year at BU, I really studied a lot. I kind of regret it a little bit just because, I just spent a lot of time in the library and I needed to just because I felt when I graduated from high school, I was unprepared relative to my peers. But then after a while, I started getting more comfortable, especially in by my junior year. I decided to intern in Washington through the BU legislative program. And I remember working for a congressman. And it was just an amazing experience, just to see how politics is practiced. And I have to admit, I partied a lot with my fellow BU students. I had a great time, and I met some great friends there. And then we started talking about maybe extending the good times. And the following semester, I applied for the BU program in Oxford, England. And my friend, my best friend, he's still one of my best friends, applied for the BU London program where he worked for a member of parliament. So on the weekends, we would just meet up and go drinking. But I remember at Oxford, it was just a really intense experience. It made me a better writer. I remember back then there were no computers or iPads. We used to have to write by longhand. And they had these tutorials where you have to, talk about your topic in depth, one-on-one with your professor. So I did that. And then, like I said, I had a chance to see the world. It was just fantastic. And I decided that it wasn't enough. And the great thing about BU was that I had a partial merit scholarship, so I was able to apply my scholarship towards my study abroad programs. So after Oxford, I went to study for summer in Shanghai, China. It was actually a Columbia University program, and it was just fantastic. Not only did I improve my Mandarin Chinese, but it was just an incredible experience. This was China, a different China, a Maoist China when people used to wear, those green Mao outfits. And it was a very romantic time. I say it just because it was back in like 1988, before Tiananmen, before U.S.-China relations started to worsen. And did that for a summer. And after that, I went to Hong Kong to study at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I took a language course. So basically, I went from one study abroad program to another for like 2 years, and BU paid for most of that. So I was very grateful, and I was able to get academic credit for these experiences. So it was a win-win all around. I got to see the world. I did well. I got excellent grades. It really prepared me well for my future career.
That's really awesome, Ellen. So once you left BU, how did you carve out your current career path as a foreign correspondent? Where was your first writing job, and who have you written for?
Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing about it is that I was a poli-sci major at BU, and later on I got a master's in foreign affairs and in law, but I've actually never taken a formal class in journalism. So it was kind of by fluke. And not to say that you don't, studying journalism wouldn't help you. Of course it would. You're better off having a well-rounded academic career, just being knowledgeable about a lot of different subjects. For me, like I said, when I graduated from BU and poli sci, I thought I would go to actually go to law school, and that was the plan. But then I ended up in Japan through the JET program, And I did that for 2 years. I went to Hong Kong to visit an uncle, and I decided I wanted to stay in Asia. So I did I did like a mass mailing my resume to about 100 companies, and I got several responses. And I got an offer from this Japanese telephone company, a telecom company called Uniden, and they offered me a job as a marketing manager, which I accepted. And a day before I was supposed to start, I got a call from this magazine called Asia Week. It was owned by Time back then. It's no longer around, but I didn't think I was going to get it. But they called me on a Sunday and asked me if I wanted to be a junior reporter. And the job would involve mostly fact checking, and the salary would be half of the other job that I got offered. And I accepted. And I did that for a year in Hong Kong, where I did a little reporting, but it was mostly fact checking. But that was really my first exposure to journalism. And even back then, I wasn't totally set on being a journalist. And after the year was up, I I decided to go back to the States and go to law school. But before that, I did another mass mailing of my resume, and I had an interview with Reuters. So they called me in, and I don't know why they did, because I didn't think I was very qualified. But I remember the head of Asia interviewed me in Cantonese, Mandarin, and Japanese. And so he was asking me questions in all three languages, and I was able to respond. And it wasn't necessarily that I was fluent, but basically, I guess my language skills were better than his. And then, I got hired at Reuters, and it was difficult. My first year, it was really a learning experience. And I thought they were going to fire me. And later on, I found out that the reason why they kept me on was because they thought I was a hard worker and that I had a lot of great ideas. And after a while, it took me a year or so, and I started to get the hang of it, and I started to flourish. And then they sent me to Tokyo, and I did well there. They offered me several bureau chief jobs. So I would say that Asian Week was my first exposure, and it could have easily gone another way. I could easily be selling you know, smartphones for a living. But instead, I decided not to go for money and to get some experience reporting.
That's great. That's really marvelous, Ellen. So, Ellen, what was the biggest fork in the road, assuming it was not all a straight line for you?
Well, there have been several forks, and I just told you one of them where I could have easily got a job, working in the cell phone industry instead of journalism, and that was just luck and timing. But there have been several forks. I remember when I was in high school, I remember I spent a lot of time reading. When I was in the library, reading a lot of news magazines, thinking about, well, would it be great to be a journalist? And I think that that sort of gave me an indication that someday I might want to be a journalist, but I didn't think I had the skills for that. And then when I was at BU, I interned for WGBH in Boston, a news station. I did that for a year, and that was an amazing experience. I would bring one of my jobs would be to bring celebrities into the studio, and I met a lot of interesting people. And they used to even allow me to write weather reports, for broadcasts. So that was an amazing experience. And I think that I, you were there forks in the road? Perhaps not, but there were like indications of what I might achieve someday. But in terms of maybe other forks in the road, whether or not whether I wanted to be a journalist. There have been times when I've had other jobs. Um, I worked for the government for a while. I did that for several years, but I realized that I could have kept going, and I worked for the State Department and Treasury as well for several years. Yeah, and I could have kept on going, but I realized that I really like being out there, meeting people, talking to people, without necessarily having a position, you know. Um, and I think journalism allows me to do that. So after that experience, I decided I wanted to be a journalist again. Applied for a job in New York with Bloomberg, and I've been with them ever since. It wasn't like was a straight line for me, and I think that it's going to be like that for a lot of people. That it's great. It's great if you know you want to be a journalist or you want to be a banker or whatever. I wanted to have an interesting job. I wanted to have a job to allow me to utilize my skills, and I think that journalism allowed me to do that. And it took me a long time to realize that journalism is what I do best.
That's great. So you found your calling, which is wonderful. And Ellen, can you share, as a foreign correspondent and journalist, what was the most interesting story you've written so far?
I can tell you about some of my more recent stories. So right now I'm talking to you from Shanghai. I'm holed up in my apartment. I've been holed up in my apartment for several weeks because of the coronavirus. So I've been involved in a lot of the coverage. It's been difficult. You know, having to work from home, right? And I've been involved in several interesting features. I mean, not all the stories that, and I'm a deputy bureau chief for Bloomberg, so I don't necessarily have to go out and report, but I really like to go out there sometimes, and especially on big stories, I like to be part of that. And the coronavirus is the biggest story of them all right now, anyway. So I've been talking to a lot of people about their experiences, not just in Shanghai, but I have friends in Wuhan who've been telling me about their experiences. So I've been involved in several enterprise stories. There was one scoop that I had just a few weeks back about how SATs and TOEFL tests were canceled for Chinese students. I mean, not necessarily, the biggest story in the world, but it's a story that affects, like BU and other universities. And it also affects a lot of people who, especially a lot of these kids who study hard in high school and they're getting ready to go to college in America and then find out, these big tests have been canceled. So their lives have been interrupted, you know. And some other stories that I've recently been involved in, there was a ruckus, between the NBA and the Chinese government when Houston Rockets general manager um, made some comments about Hong Kong, and I had to cover a story just because there was going to be an NBA game in Shanghai the following day. And it was the first time that I had to sending Twitter videos and doing all the social media stuff. I'm normally a guy who likes to write and edit. I'm on a terminal. Don't get me wrong. I do some podcasting and I do some television, and radio, but it was a little more difficult because I had to go out to the Mercedes-Benz arena and try to get all this video while I'm interviewing people in Chinese. I mean, it was fun. It was interesting. And then, Bloomberg tends to. I like to think Bloomberg has the final word. So I go there and I'm talking to people. I'm trying to figure out how they feel about this. About the situation. A lot of people here in China love basketball, love the NBA, but are also proud to be Chinese. So when I went to watch the first NBA game in China right after this crisis between the two parties, you know, I was just checking out what is there going to be protests, where there are going to be a lot of people who are angry. But when I went to watch the game, initially there was a lot of anxiety, but as the game went along, people started cheering, people started really enjoying the game. And so then, I wrote a story and I did a video piece telling people at the end of the day, we shouldn't forget what was said, what was done. But at the end of the day, NBA basketball could be something that unites the two countries.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's something that, like not everybody can really experience from here in the United States. So I'm now really curious about your day-to-day work before the coronavirus outbreak. Can you tell me and the listeners what's in a day in the life like?
There is no seriously, and this is why I really like my job is that there is no typical day. I have like basically two reporting lines. One is focus on China, where I'm a deputy bureau chief. I help manage a pretty good sized bureau, but I also do a lot of reporting, editing, focus on China, explaining China to the rest of the world. And then my other reporting line is global, where I'm responsible for this. It's a Bloomberg global newsletter, but it's more like a newspaper, which we put out. It's like a mobile newspaper that we put out several times a day called Daybreak. And when I come in, I put out a Middle East edition, and then before I go to lunch, I put out a European edition focused on London, and then before I go home, I help publish a New York edition, and each edition is it's geared toward that particular client base. So for Dubai, a lot of the news in it, I mean, it's global. It could be about the coronavirus. It could be about the Fed, but there's also, a lot of stuff about the Middle East, such as the crisis in Idlib. That would be something that our clients in the Middle East would want to know more about. And then for Europe, for the European edition, I would focus a lot on Brexit, stuff like that. So, throughout the day, I'm I'm writing, I'm editing, I'm podcasting, I'm doing television, I'm doing radio. So it's pretty exciting.
That seems very exciting day. So are there any challenges for you while you're at work or being a foreign correspondent?
Working in China, I mean, it's not the easiest place in the world. It's not like, reporting in New York where you just call someone up and someone is more often than not, they're willing to tell you their name and you ask them about politics and they're more than happy to give you their opinion. In China, it's a little more difficult. People sometimes don't want to give their names, their full names. They're just a little more cautious, mainly because of the nature of journalism in China. So that's a challenge. But I have to say that I've never been told what to say or what to write in China. It is challenging in many different ways. But it's also very exciting. Outside the U.S., China is the most important market for us, and in some ways, it's the most important news market as well. Just because China, in some ways, is like a black box. It's really hard for people to figure out what's going on here. And my job is sort of to read the tea leaves and sort of decipher what's going on here for a global audience. And sometimes I don't even know what's going on.
Okay, that's great, Ellen. What are the best parts of doing what you do? Since we talked about challenges, now I want to learn about the best parts of being a foreign correspondent.
I think the best part is, part of it is like being in school forever and getting paid, getting paid well to be in school. I mean, every day I come in, I'm reading a lot, I'm writing a lot, and I'm learning a lot. In the beginning, it was about it was about getting scoops and being the best reporter, being the best editor. But now that I guess I'm in the September of my career, not later. I do a lot of mentoring now. Bloomberg has a journalism partnership with Fudan University here in Shanghai, one of the best universities in China. And then sometimes I teach there and I mentor students there as well. And I enjoy the mentoring part of my job, probably more now, I guess, than I would have been maybe in an early stage of my career. I enjoy traveling. I get to, you know, I always I spend several months, I'm not several months, several weeks a year in Hong Kong, U.S., and London. I'm working in different, environments, meeting different people, talking to very interesting people. In China, like I said, it's a black box sometimes, and sometimes it's very hard to figure out what's going on. But when you do, it's very rewarding. And I think another great thing about journalism too is just the fact that you don't have a position. It's basically what the facts tell you. And with Bloomberg, we're very data driven. So you know, unless the data is there, I tend you you wouldn't write it, right? You want to have the evidence to back it up. And I just compare that with maybe other news organizations I worked for in the past, where I would maybe just write something, then find data to back it up. At Bloomberg, first thing you do is you try to find the data to back it up, and then you write your story. So I enjoy that aspect of working at Bloomberg. It's very transparent, and I have to admit, it's an organization that has a very big impact all over the world.
Ellen, I'm really touched that, like out of your busy schedule, you still find some time to give back to the local community by mentoring students at Fudan University. So do you have any advice for students or young alumni who's listening to this podcast and who wants to be a foreign correspondent?
Sure. I think if you're still in college, I think that just make sure that you're taking a wide range of classes, and also taking like, I guess, these core classes that don't seem very useful now, but they will be in the future. And I'm saying that just make sure you're taking a lot. If you want to be a journalist, make sure you're taking a lot of English classes. It could be English literature, it could be creative writing, taking math classes, calculus or geometry. I mean, you always go back to English or math. And then the other classes that I took are really helpful. Of course, all the political science classes, economics, even acting helped me. Just because sometimes you need to sort of be able to pretend you're interested even when you're not in something. So, but anyway, I would say that just make sure that you're taking a wide range of classes in college, and then if you're finished, I think that the most important thing is college doesn't. IB prepare me very well, but college doesn't necessarily prepare you for the real world. And what I'm saying is that sometimes working can be a grind, you know what I'm saying? And you need to be able to persevere. And you may not be the smartest person around, and I felt that way in my first job at Reuters, but you have to sort of make up for it in other ways by working harder than everybody else. Let's call them these intangibles. You got to be the guy with a lot of ideas, the creative guy like me. But you have to sort of find a niche, and your time will come. It's important to be patient and to and to sort of be flexible, because you just never know what what your career path is going to eventually end up being.
Those are golden. So, Ellen, we are end of our time. I cannot thank you enough for being on the Proud to Be You podcast with me today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks again to Ellen for being part of the Proud to Be You podcast. Thank you so much for the work you are doing, and we hope you are staying safe and well during these challenging times. If you'd like to read some of Ellen's most recent reporting, check out the link in the show notes of this episode.
Great job, Yuna, and my thanks to Alan as well for being part of the podcast.
On behalf of everyone on the BU Alumni Relations team, thanks so much for listening to Proud to Be You. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you find your episodes. I'm Jeff Murphy, and no matter where your path takes you, be proud to be you. The Proud to Be You podcast is produced by Boston University Alumni Relations. Our theme is from Jump and APM Music. To learn more about Proud to Be You, visit bu.edu/alumni/podcast.